Good morning, everyone. Pastor Mike here. Hope you're all doing well, getting ready for your day if you're on your way to work, or if you catch this video a little later when you wake up. Just wanted to give an encouraging word to all of you today. And God gave me kind of a message that I want to kind of do like a little parallel of this passage. I'm going to be reading out of Matthew 11 with context where John the Baptist is in prison, and he found himself isolated and alone, and he is just kind of processing where he's at and what's going on in the world around him. And so I wanted to read this Matthew 11, starting in verse 1. When Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in their cities. Now when John heard in prison about the deeds of the Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to him, "Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?" And Jesus answered them, "Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk, lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. And blessed is the one who is not offended by me." So let's check this out. So kind of doing this little parallel. So John the Baptist, he comes on the scene. He's the forerunner to announce the Messiah. And, before all this, he's doing his thing. He's moving in his ministry, baptizes Jesus. Things are great. Pulls back a bit from his ministry, but he's still free, and he's doing his thing. And he's preaching the word, and he's going in. He rebukes King Herod Antipas rebukes him for marrying his brother's wife, and that lands him in prison. So one day he's free, and he's just living life like he normally would, and then bam, he finds himself alone and in prison. And now he's in this place. Don't know how long he was in prison when this transpired, but now he's in this place alone, and he has questions. And I know a lot of us right now that are feeling confined, feeling like, with this whole quarantine thing, like we might have questions. We might be like John saying, like, God, like, what is going on? Is there a purpose in this? And one of the things that I wanted to what encouraged me was that this is John the Baptist we're talking about, the forerunner. It says later on that, paraphrasing, that Jesus said, that there was no man greater that at that time than John the Baptist that was living in that time. So that man had questions, and they were honest questions. And really, it kind of just blows my mind a little bit, because if you look at those questions, his question was, "Are you the Christ? Are you the one that we are looking for, or should we look for another?" He's questioning who Jesus is, his identity. Are you the one? And what I love is the honesty. He asked the honest question of where he was at, and I just love that about God, that we can just go to him honestly, with a contrite heart, with our questions. And the other great thing is that Jesus doesn't rebuke him. I love it. He doesn't answer the question. He tells them, "Look, check out what's going on." So when I first read this, in the passage where it says, in verse 4, it says, "And Jesus answered them," this is John's disciples, "Go and tell John what you hear and see." And I was like, okay, so did Jesus go about and show him what he was doing? So I checked out in the same passage that's found in Luke 7. And in chapter 7:18, it starts out, "The disciples of John reported all these things to him and John." The context of this is, now there are some of John's disciples. Before this, the centurion's servant is healed, and there is also a boy there's this funeral procession going on. Jesus goes over to the coffin, or whatever they use, the mat, whatever they use in those days, and he goes over to it and he heals this boy. Now, John's disciples saw this. Now, after seeing this, they go back to John and report this to John. And now it says in Luke 7:19, "Calling two of his disciples to him, sent them to the Lord, saying, 'Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another?' And the men had come to him and said, 'John the Baptist has sent us to you, saying, Are you the one who is to come, or should we look for another?' And Jesus says the same thing. Look, you go show and you go tell John what you've seen." So these disciples have actually seen what's going on. So the context kind of just like broadens a bit now, because not only are they going by a word, but now they're going back and saying, "John, this is what we saw." And I wanted to just also kind of parallel where with John being in prison, in isolation, in confinement, in quarantine, if you will, and having questions. We all have questions. And I feel like God would be saying to us, look, that like just because you feel confined, it doesn't mean that I am. God is still doing things. We might be kind of, hooked up in our little cocoon right here, but God's still moving and doing things. And I think the most important thing in this season right now is that we should be looking for those things. I mean, I know myself, my kids, their birthdays are this week, and our original plans for this, before all this happened, was they were going to be up in school. So my wife and I were kind of like, man, how are we want to get together with our kids, but how are we going to do this? Now, even though this is a crisis going on, our kids are home, all that stuff. So we have an opportunity now to celebrate with them. So that's a good thing that has come out of this. So I just want to encourage you to don't only look at what's going on in your confinement. The outside of these walls, God is still moving. I'm amazed at what God is doing in our church right now. I feel like we're connecting more than ever, and we're not even together with each other. And I love that. So I just wanted to encourage you to just look for what God is doing, because he is doing things. He is doing things, whether you can see it outside your four walls or not. He is still who he is. He hasn't changed. God, Jesus, is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So Jesus hasn't changed. You can bring your questions to him and just look at what he's doing in your life. You don't have to look far, because it can be so easy to focus on what's going on around us that we miss what he's doing, miss the good things that he's doing. So I just wanted to encourage you with that. And just, I know some of us are going through some real serious stuff. I mean, being unemployed, there are real needs, and I don't want to diminish that. But I also don't want to diminish what God is doing, because I feel like, like when we elevate our problems, we deviate from his purposes. So I don't want to focus on my problems, because he's still doing things, just like John. Look, he asks those questions. Are you who you say you are? And Jesus says, I don't know, John, you tell me. The sick are being healed. The lepers are being cleansed. The lame are walking. I'm still moving, John. Even though you might feel alone, even though you might not be able to see beyond your perspective, but I'm still moving and working. And at the end of this, I just feel like there's going to be such an infusion of fire in our church, in the church as a whole, because we are all just kind of pressing in, and we're just allowing God to just use us in different ways. So I just wanted to encourage you with that word today. Just keep your eyes on him. Be honest with him. If you have questions, you can bring them to him. He wants to carry those burdens. But just at the same time, remember that he's still working. He is still who he says he is. He is the one that we are looking for. So be encouraged today. Have a wonderful day, and I'll be talking to you soon. God bless.